Some leaders manage, others orchestrate, and then there are those rare few who lead with authenticity and purpose, where it's just not about the work and how it gets done, but about the people who do the work. That's Jason Holzman. He builds teams that thrive on trust, adaptability, and the understanding that change isn't an event, it's a constant reality. And in an era where change is happening faster than ever, leadership is no longer just about guiding teams. It's about ensuring they have the resilience, adaptability, and clarity to navigate the unknown. The ability to lead through uncertainty isn't optional anymore. It's the defining skill of modern leadership. On this episode of the Creative Ops Podcast, I sat down with Jason Holzman, SVP of Creative, Production, and Brand Strategy at Macy's. He's a leader who has seen advertising, media, and retail reinvent themselves from the inside out. And the conversation we had, it wasn't about leadership cliches or step by step frameworks. It was about leading when change isn't a moment in time, but an ongoing force. We talked about how to stay ahead and how to turn uncertainty into an advantage. We dove into a lot in this episode. We talked about trust, transparency, and decision making, and why leadership isn't about control, but about creating the right conditions. We dove into why process should serve people and not the other way around, the hidden flaws in how most teams structure work. Because leadership isn't about authority, it's about serving and elevating those around you. And the change management philosophy shift from reacting to change to designing for it, from problem solving to problem framing. One question we kept coming back to that I'll also touch on in my reflection segment at the end. If change and uncertainty are a constant presence, how do we lead in a way that strengthens teams so they don't just keep up, but actually thrive? Jason Holzman, welcome to the Creative Ops Podcast. How are you today?
I am great, and it is a thrill to be here. I'm a huge fan of you and your work and the conversations that you've helped facilitate. So I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, thanks very much. I am all about the conversation these days, and I've been looking forward to having this one with you for a while. Today, we're going to talk about leadership. So, this is going to be one of those episodes, as the listeners know, every now and then I like to do episodes where it's not about a specific, you know, challenge or topic or something like that. You and I have had lots of offline conversations, and we're both very comfortable following our individual and collective curiosity. So we're going to do that today about leadership. And the reason I want to talk to you about leadership is you're a great follow on LinkedIn. You Through our conversations, through your writing, you sort of strike me as a modern day, I'm going to call you a modern day creative operations philosopher, if I may. You're currently the SVP of Creative and Production and Brand Strategy at Macy's. But you and I have been around for a while. You've been around for a while, and you've had many leadership positions: Macy's, NBC Universal, a whole raft of other places. So I'd really like to learn and dig into more today, like your leadership philosophy, because while it is true, the cliche is true, change is a constant. We seem to have been living through a time where change is rapid. There is no more ebb and flow. It's just like, okay, what is today's change, and how are we going to deal with it? And we're living in this moment where we seem to be on the verge of even more seismic change. And by that I mean AI. AI is going to change everything. So I want to have this conversation with you about leadership. Do you think of leadership as something that does change as the circumstances around us change, specifically technology? Because you've been through a few technological evolutions or revolutions. So let's start there, and maybe through that we'll learn a bit about your history as well. Take us back a bit, maybe.
Yeah.
And then as the conversation goes, we'll dig into more of the specifics of your leadership philosophy.
Amazing. First of all, thank you. It was very kind what you had to say. I appreciate it. And I do think, there is sort of a cliche, I think, in when you're in corporate America about, the ability to lead through change. And what's fascinating is the longer you've been in the corporate world, the more you realize that even though I think you're right, Nish, AI is going to usher in some change in a way that maybe past changes in practice and technology haven't. But at the end of the day, I think some of the underlying principles of how to think about, again, that cliche of managing through change, probably still apply and will still continue to apply. So just to hit on what you were saying about, let's go back in time a little bit. I actually think one of my earliest lessons about how to think about change management and how to apply that to leadership came the very beginning of my career. So the first chapter, I spent a lot of years working in advertising agencies, sort of traditional consumer advertising agencies. Then I spent a chunk of time working in media and entertainment at NBC Universal, and now I'm in the retail space with Macy's. But that first role when I worked in advertising, my very first job at an ad agency coming out of college was a long time ago. And when I started at that agency, um, the agency had a studio where we actually made mechanicals, the actual things that we used to hand off to printers to make magazine ads or billboards. We made them by hand. So there was a whole studio of craftspeople who would cut type and make lithographs in a dark room and actually, like, really in a very handcrafted way, make these mechanicals. Very quickly, literally within a year, that very first year of me being in that job in a very junior role, we sort of saw the beginnings of this digital revolution in desktop publishing and sort of creative tools. Quark was a big tool at the time, and of course Photoshop, and then Illustrator. And it radically transformed the way we did our work in the agency. And the people who were part of that studio, very quickly, it became apparent they had to do one of two things. Either they had to adapt and learn those digital and technical skills in a new way in order to do a similar kind of job they were doing, or they would have to do another job, and that might actually mean leaving the agency. And watching the way the leadership of that company, and then the specific leaders of the studio, and then all the creative people, the art directors and creative directors who I worked with, helped manage that change, I think taught me a lot about the impacts that technology can have, how to hold people's hands and help them through that. And then really, I think led directly, if I'm condensing decades of thinking about this into a few key words, to really three words that I think about probably the most when I think about leadership, and then again managing people through those moments of change. And those three words are transparency, empathy, and positivity. And I'll pause for a second as I can sort of unpack each of those. But just if you had any comments or thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we might spend the next hour just on those three things because there is so much to unpack there, and it's rooted in a humanness, which is one of the things I love about you and speaking with you is it is rooted in humanness. And I want to dig into those three things. I had a question for you first, though. When you think about change today, um, like change management has become this discipline. When change has to happen, and usually in large organizations, you know this, it's like, let's call in the consultants. And battalions of consultants come in with their frameworks and things like that, that the junior consultants are just pulling from a library of frameworks, right? It's not like new work. But they come in with this playbook. And I think those playbooks are extinct today because I think change used to be a moment in time. uh, I think change today, going back to the, what I was saying at the start, I think change is constant. And I think it has been for a while. We just haven't said it out loud. And maybe we take a couple of minutes to talk about this and then go back to transparency and empathy. Is do you, I think we should just be rooting in ourselves in the understanding that change is constant so that it doesn't become this big emotional, I don't know if emotional is the right word, but it doesn't become this big, sort of this big like monster in the closet, like when we're kids, right? Like, oh, I've got to open the closet because change is coming out. Change is just going to happen. And should we almost think about like every month or every quarter, and certainly at the start of the year, we should think about shipping change, like getting proactive about change. Because I think then emotionally, psychologically, we own change versus change happening to us. I don't
Mhm.
know. What do you think about that? Like, I almost think change should be like a software product. We're constantly shipping updates.
Hmm. That's so. Again, this is why I love talking to you. I mean, that's such an interesting reframing of what change is and what it means, and I've never thought about it that way before. I, um, I'm gonna build on that by uh, referencing another thing that I think is key that actually to leadership and to figuring out how to continually live with change and the constant that, to your point, it is and will be, um, but that I think is also essential organizationally, and certainly for leaders. And it's around building trust. When you think about what what trust between colleagues, between employees and leadership, between companies and their partners is built on. I think trust is built on a lot of those basic principles I talked about, like transparency and empathy and positivity. But when you are always trying to build trust in the relationships that you have, trust is kind of the key thing that helps people navigate uncertainty together. Like if you and I don't trust each other, and we go into a situation that is full of uncertainty, which I think is kind of what you're getting at with the idea of change being this constant, like, nothing's predictable anymore. We don't know what the business is going to look like. We don't know what job we're going to have to do. We don't know what tools we're going to have to do them with. We don't know who the people are we're going to have to work with. If you and I don't trust each other, and we are going into a situation that is really full of uncertainty, it's going to be extremely hard for us to figure out how to get through that together. If you and I trust each other because and again, I'm just going to feel like these are buzzwords, but if we're transparent with each other, so we share information, we express empathy by getting to know each other and genuinely caring about the things that are happening in each other's lives. We feel optimistic and hopeful about our chances to succeed together. Those things build trust. And then when we have that trust and we encounter that maybe daily situation where things are changing and we don't know what the answer is going to be, we feel much more confident that we're going to be able to figure out how to navigate it together. So I again, I think your reframing is so fascinating that changes this product we need to ship every day. But I think if we're going to do that effectively, we need to build trust with each other and with all the people that we're working with. And that trust is sort of the key thing that will help us figure out how to get through that uncertainty and that constant change in a productive way.
Yeah, I love that. I might end up referencing my girlfriend in this episode, which she listens to this, even though she's not in our world. She just falls asleep to my voice, I guess. I'm boring, but the trust thing is so important. I think trust is an outcome of those three key items you mentioned: transparency, empathy, positivity. And you're so right. Without that trust, we can't navigate uncertainty. And now you've heard me, others have heard me talk in this podcast a lot about AI. And one of the things that I'm an AI optimist, and I think there's going to be massive benefits that come out of the next 5, 10, 15 years that we're all going to navigate together. But it's also very true that there's going to be some chaos. Like our chances individually, collectively at defaulting and maximizing for the positive versus the negative is that trust, because it is with that trust we are able to navigate through the fog of uncertainty to chart. I believe we are all going to be charting a new course, personally, professionally, societally, and trust is going to be key, because with trust, then we can move forward together and go, yeah, we don't have a map. We don't know how to get from here to there. We don't even know where there is. But I'm going to stop talking about the AI thing. We'll come back to that. Take us back to transparency, positivity, empathy. Use the term buzzwords. I do think those terms, many others, have become buzzwords because we don't bring our full humanness to our jobs. We talk about it, but we don't. And that's where I think you're a little bit different. That's why I only told you today, but to me, you're sort of this like philosopher of creative operations or creative production, because of like you're an incredibly effective operator and executive. But I think a big part of the why you are is your humanness. So tell us about those three things, and pull from those experiences you had. What did those agency leaders do? How did they express empathy, positivity?
Yeah, yeah, and transparency. Again, thank you so much, Nish. Those are very generous words. I really appreciate it. There was a period where you were sort of discouraged in a lot of, maybe even most of corporate America, from bringing all of who you were to your job. It was, whoever you were outside of the office is fine, but when you come into the office, you need to be there to do the job and be a different person. And then I think at a certain point, it became more acceptable to, in the parlance of the industry, bring your authentic self or your full
Right.
self to work. And I think that's been a great shift. I do really believe that is important. Um, uh, but in my experience, I've always tried to be. I would put it slightly differently than bring your full self to the office. I've always just tried to authentically be who I was in all of these interactions, because I think if you spend all of your time trying to be one way here and a different way there, or one way with this person and a different way with this person, um, that is it's very time consuming. It's sometimes hard to remember, wait, who am I supposed to be now and who am I supposed to be? And you're not actually focusing on the relationship and the work. Whereas if you are authentically who you are in all those interactions, you're just spending time building those relationships and trying to accomplish something together. So just to dig in a little more to those three words. And again, I really have spent a lot of time thinking about how to be an effective leader and partner and collaborator. Um, and I did, I really kept coming back to those words because. So I'll start with transparency. Um, one of the things that I saw a lot in really all of the chapters of my career leading up to this one was the way that some leaders and some collaborators tried to use information and access to information as a way to amass power and influence within an organization. And I'm going to guess a lot of people listening have probably seen some version of that themselves. If I know something and nobody else knows that thing, that gives me some kind of power or influence or some way to get an advantage over the other people on the team. The truth is, and this is what I witnessed over and over again, the people who did that, the people who were, kept information to themselves, didn't share insights, didn't tell people what they had learned in a meeting, didn't talk about this great thing that they saw that would be helpful to other people. Those people almost never got past a certain level in the organization. Do you know why? Because nobody trusted them, because nobody believed that they were going to be a good partner. Nobody believed that they were actually going to be effective above a certain level. So, in a nutshell, I just, more and more, I saw that the people who were, open about what they knew, the people who shared the information they had, the people who shared their ideas, um, those were the people who, again, this is my experience, more often than not only formed meaningful relationships and certainly a high level of trust with the people they work with, but they were the people who actually continued to rise and grow in the organization. I think there's a lot of um, you know this actually, I apologize in advance. This will probably touch on AI, but I know we want to get to that at a certain point. But um, especially in the world we live in now with AI, ideas are ideas are cheap. It really is about the collaboration and then the execution against those ideas. So if you think I'm going to keep this information, I'm going to use it to develop the best idea, or I'm going to come up with all the ideas and I'm not going to share them with anybody else. I'm just going to share them with this one other, with my boss. Um, Everyone has lots of ideas. That is not a currency that is going to help you win. What will help you win is when you are seen as the person who is willing to share the most, the person who is willing to collaborate, the person who is willing to be a great partner, the person who always is open and is a source of information and insight. So that was my sort of lesson on transparency. I'll be a little briefer about empathy and
No, no, no.
positivity.
Keep going. Keep going.
So empathy. I will say it's part. It is sort of core to who I am. I think that maybe you use this term. I am definitely sort of a humanist. Like I really believe in the power of human connection. Um, but I also believe that empathy is actually, in my experience, much simpler than a lot of people find it sort of daunting, and they worry that creating that some amount of emotional vulnerability will be difficult and taxing. The truth is, like, I've always found empathy to be, you know, really come down to just asking people questions. How are you? What's going on with you? What's happening in your life? How are the people that you care about? What's on your mind? What is there something that's troubling you? Is there something how can I be helpful? Um, Asking those questions and actually listen, being open to what somebody responds back to you, and then thinking about how to engage with them. That sort of is the root of empathy, and it actually, the lesson there actually came from a different, I guess, subchapter of my career, which is not actually my professional career. Um, all the years that I was working in advertising, almost all the years I was working in advertising, I was also taking acting classes. For a long time, I was really interested in theater and acting, and and improv. I studied with the Upright Citizens Brigade for a while, and one of the most important lessons, certainly in improv, but also in theater, is um, to be a good listener and then to respond based on what when you watch a performance and you say to yourself, "Oh, this person's not a good actor." Most of the time, that is because they know what the line is and they're not actually listening to what the other person in the scene is saying. They're just waiting for their moment to say what their line is. That's, in a nutshell, often bad acting. Empathy is built on that idea of listening and responding. So that was certainly something that I saw some people do better or not as well in my professional career, but it's also something that I really learned a lot from my study of acting and improv. Positivity or optimism, that third piece that is I find to be really important. You know, this is I didn't obviously come up with this. A lot of people have heard this saying before, but I found it to be a really big unlock for me. Somebody actually said this to me once. If you don't feel optimistic about our chances to succeed, why should anybody else? And that to me spoke volumes, and it really informed again a lot of how I think about helping people navigate through change. It doesn't mean positivity or optimism is not it's all going to be great. Nothing's going to be a problem. AI is not going to take anyone's job. It's all going to be fine. That's not what I mean by positivity. What I mean is um, there is always, in my experience, some way to reframe in the same way that you reframed change into this idea of like a software that we're shipping every day. There's always a way to reframe whatever the challenge is or whatever the issue is that you're having, and think about how do I put a positive lens or spin on it. And if you know if you're always thinking about how to do that, especially when you lead a team, and again, if you're transparent about the challenges, and you have a lot of empathy for the challenges that the other people on the team are going through, but you approach those with positivity. Um, Again, in my experience, more often than not, you set yourself up to succeed.
So I'm loving all that. I want to react to some of that and then actually ask you a couple of questions because we are in this AI moment. One is what you said about the authenticity, because I think that word over the last few years has become almost a character of itself, right? But I think the way you describe it of you're just you and you're showing up as you. And that'll work for some people. It won't work for everybody, but it's you. And what you made me think about is when we show up for ourselves instead of a series of characters trying to become like enough for the moment, the situation, or a particular relationship, what it allows us to do is then maximize the energy we are putting towards the relationship and towards the work. And I think that's important in the business environment because that's where our energy needs to show up. When it comes to transparency, I think I think like, especially in this AI moment, what I'm seeing lacking from leaders today, especially, is transparency about, yeah, there are going to be some like dramatic changes. Um, and I think leaders are also suffering as well because most leaders today are and I say this with all due respect, having been one myself for a while, are spreadsheet CEOs. They're spreadsheet leaders. And we're moving into a time where the spreadsheet work, the automation optimization of decision making, the machines are going to be better at doing that than the humans are. The work is going to be to activate and bring out and harness the potential of our human qualities individually and collectively. But I think we have to start with transparency about here's the situation, here's what's going on, whether that's in a one-on-one performance review or having a larger conversation around AI and the change that it's going to bring. And empathy, again, I think like authenticity, it's sort of taken a beating over the last few years because I do think we've in this like desire to show up as our whole selves or encourage people to show up with their whole selves, I do think it sort of tipped over into let's hold hands and sing kumbaya. But I think we can have empathy and still, say we have to create value. Like that's still the mission of an organization. The mission of an organization is not to, it's not there for group therapy necessarily. It's But we can still hold space. And that's what I think of empathy as, is I can still listen to somebody, as you said, ask them, how are you? What's going on? Um, Still hold space for it, but then still say, we have a job to do. We have to create value. And if somebody's not able to do that in the moment, then you deal with that situation. And then positivity, yeah, it's always got to be positive. And I'll share. So you know this because you and I have hung out together in person at that over the top coffee bar in New York City once, and had dinner once or twice. But I have a disability, so I walk with a cane. I've got braces on both legs. It's a degenerative condition. So in the grand scheme of genetic defects, it's sort of like a pinprick. It's highly inconvenient, and stairs and buttons are my kryptonite. But that disability for me set in my mid 30s, and what it taught me is, one of many things it taught me is, you can give in to whatever's in front of you: a disability, a workforce reduction, budget cuts, a department demanding that they need something right away, even though we don't have time or capacity, and everyone's going to have to work hero hours. And you can either deal with it as, this sucks, it's overwhelming, I'm just going to be upset and angry about it. Or, even in the face of something that you wish had not visited you, a disability, an unexpected deadline, um, you can still deal with it in a positive way, and go, all right, it's just a game. Like, I have two choices. And again, I know it's cliched. You can say, I'm going to give into it and I'm going to be upset about it, or go, no, it's a game. Life is a game. Everything is a game. And you got a choice, negative or positive. And like you, uh, and I would say my disabilities actually taught me this, I now default to, okay, whatever happens, happens, deal with it, and deal with it in a positive way. Because I think through everything we deal with, we could either become our worst selves or our better selves. So while positivity sounds like one of those motivational posters you and I grew up with on the office walls, it is critical. Like, it is critical.
Yeah, I mean, maybe now more than ever. So first of all, and I think I maybe said this the first time you mentioned this. I mean, thank you for sharing that piece of your story, because I think it is. I appreciate the trusted, sharing with me, and I guess with all of the everyone listening to this podcast. Um, what that makes me think of, interestingly, is the it actually takes me back to some of the things that I think are really helpful for creative leaders, especially. And again, most of my career I've been managing within creative organizations. Um, so yes, again, certainly all the things we talked about, figuring out how to think optimistically about the opportunities, not just focus on the challenges and where we could go wrong. But the boxes that we end up being put in, whether it's because of, in a corporate setting, the sales results, or in a personal setting, a disability that makes certain things more challenging than they were before, those boxes are actually the thing that can create the most creative moments in our lives. So,
Yes.
years ago, I used to teach advertising creative at FIT in New York City, the Fashion Institute. They had a communication design department, and there was classes in advertising. And the point of the class was to help people understand how to come up with great advertising solutions for a whole range of products. And one of the key lessons that I try to impart to the students was that, often, if you say to somebody, um, come up with a great ad for any product, and you have no budget constraints, and you could come up with any idea, and it could be anything, and you could have any actor and in the spot. Um, it was actually the most difficult assignment you could possibly give somebody. On the flip side, when I said to them, okay, I need you to come up with a great ad for this company that makes concrete, and you can only put 8 words in the headline, and you've got to have a picture of the concrete product. The more constraints I gave them, inevitably, the more creative ideas they came back with. And so I think the learning there, and again, this is definitely about how we operate in the corporate world, or the world we live in, or in our personal lives. But in all of those arenas, I think that having those constraints, having those things that box us in some way, almost always help us be our most creative selves and come up with the most interesting, innovative, out of the box ideas.
That is super fascinating. So I want to talk a bit about that, and you and I have talked about like imagination gaps. But before we get there, just sort of playing off that a little bit, because you made me think about like creative constraints, and what is that Mark Twain quote? I would have written something shorter if I had more time.
Yes, exactly.
Which is, I think Mark Twain basically sort of had a premonition of Twitter and the original 140 character count, right? And um, like like a really good tweet when it was only 140 characters before whatever it has become morphed into now. Um, you had to be really talented with your words, whether you're trying to say something serious, funny, poignant, whatever it might be, but say something in within a constraint is really hard. And people who write copy for like print ads or billboards that are going to be in Times Square or something, like they're really bloody good at this. So yes, creative constraints on one side, and again, not to make this about me and my disability, but um, like the constraints of disability actually became fuel for like the constraints, the challenges are actually the opportunity. um, is the way what I'm hearing you say, and the way I think about my own experience, like personally, professionally, is like we do need those constraints because what is that other cliche? Constraints are the mother of all inventions. Like DeepSeek over the last couple of weeks, right? Again, I can't help myself. AI stuff, like they
Yeah.
created an AI model, LLM, on par with OpenAI for $6 million. I think that might be a bit of a lie,
Yeah,
but
maybe.
for much less cost and much less time than OpenAI, right? Because
Yeah.
they had to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so constraints are good for fueling creativity. But on the other side of the spectrum, when we do have blank canvas, we seem to be in a time where we are increasingly struggling with the blank canvas. And I think that's because we have an imagination gap. So let's talk a bit about like curiosity, imagination, because I do think we are moving into a time where leaders are going to have to figure out how do we once again activate creativity and curiosity at scale, and how do we harness that? Because in a world where AIs, I believe, are going to come in and do the vast majority of work that we do across org charts today, because it is machine like work, basically pre algorithm or pre AI, what is going to be left is to create tomorrow. And the job of creating tomorrow is blank canvas work. And I think most of us struggle with that today. So let's talk a bit about curiosity and how that sort of factors into your approach to leadership.
Yeah. So I think there's, I feel like I'm saying, there was a time and this happened. But I'm gonna use that framing again. I think there was a time when the assumption was the leader of the organization, the person who you were going to look to provide, like, inspiration and get us through whatever business challenges we might have, was the person who had all the right answers all the time. You could go into their office and like we're gonna, this is the direction we're gonna go in, or we're gonna hit this sales number by doing this, or we have this inventory and we're gonna move it over here and ship it there, and that's gonna solve this problem. Um, and that assumption also led to a lot of assumptions around the kind of person who made a good leader, somebody who seemed decisive and didn't need to do a lot of listening because they already knew what the answers were. The truth is, and I think AI and the way we interact with that technology is a perfect sort of example of this. The most effective leaders today are the ones who ask the best questions, and they are able to do that. To your question, to your point about curiosity, I think because they have the most innate curiosity about the world. I think you could certainly make a case that curiosity is the most essential human quality, right? Like, what is the thing that enabled us to sort of evolve over time and continually adapt and over thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. Curiosity is sort of one of those essential things, and um, or maybe the most essential thing. But I think again, there was a period where maybe we started to devalue that, and we didn't need to be curious. We don't need to ask questions. We just need to like pretend like we have all the answers, and we're going to keep moving ahead. Um, but I think if AI has taught us anything, and we there was certainly a moment where it seemed like prompt engineer and was going to be the job of the future. But even the way we interact with AI today, or we use that technology, or a leader might want to use those tools. It really is about having sort of endless curiosity, and then using that curiosity to figure out how to ask the most insightful, most probing, most thoughtful, most inspiring questions. And my feeling is, that is going to be the thing that will maybe exponentially, as we go forward, differentiate the really successful leaders from the people who just can't figure out how to adapt to the world we're in. I'm constantly asking questions of the people I work with, of my team, of the people around me. Again, because I'm curious and I love to learn, but also I don't think there's any way to succeed, certainly in my job, without figuring out how to ask the most insightful and the best questions. And there's so many examples of in all kinds of fields of people who are really expert at that, and I'm really fascinated by journalists and people who are in a way professional questioners.
Are you curious about yourself? And
Oh
by
yeah.
that, I mean like journaling, meditation, things
Hmm.
like that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people over the years have asked if I meditate. I've actually never meditated, but I do. Yeah, I would say I am introspective. Uh, Definitely spent my share of time in therapy trying to unlock the things that are, why I think the way I do, and what are the things that can help me emotionally deal with the challenges in my life more effectively. So, yes, definitely very curious about myself, what makes me tick, but I've actually never meditated.
Yeah, one of the things, and I know it's different in large corporate environments. There's so many rules in terms of what you can ask and not ask, even during the interviewing process. But I've now I've been lucky enough to have been in smaller organizations for most of my career, like ones I've started or gone in and helped others. And I like I myself have become increasingly introspective over the years, like meditation, journaling, just spending a lot of time on my own. And I actually probe for that during the interview process now. And or if I'm going into an organization where people are already there, it's something that I'm looking for. So I think those that are, and this might be bias because of my own particular bent towards this, But I think introspection actually helps to fuel curiosity about the world around you. So it's sort of paradoxical. I think we have to
Yeah.
look inside and know ourselves and like always keep walking down that path of self-awareness. I don't think anybody ever gets to 100% self-awareness, but I think the more we do that introspective work, the better we are at being curious about the people and the world around us. And I think that has, like, for leaders, for today's leaders and tomorrow's leaders, I think curiosity, both their own curiosity and being able to like harness that innate human curiosity from those around them is going to be critical, especially as I think the time we're moving into is the job is to create tomorrow, because yesterday will be automated at scale and speed and cost efficiently, because that's what AI is really good at. But the humans are the ones that are good at creating tomorrow. We always have been, and I think the opportunity now is for more of us to do it, but those muscles are sort of atrophied.
Yeah, I mean, I love that the way you said that, the more introspective we are, the more curiosity we have about the world around us. I think that is so spot on. Um, yeah, I love that.
So let's get into a couple of more tactical things, and maybe we'll come back to sort of the more of the philosophical. Like, this podcast has got a lot of creative operations listeners, project managers, resource managers, even a smattering of CMOs, who I would love to have on the podcast, by the way, if you're listening. Um, it's so leadership as it applies to the day to day. Creative operations people, creative production people are always dealing with, well, they want 10 things, we've got capacity for four. Like, how do you lead a team through dealing with the constant, never ending, we just don't have enough time, we don't have enough resources and things like that? Because until our, these AI tools are fully ready for prime time, most people are still steeped in that is today's reality. So, what's your approach to leadership? And I don't know, maybe you want to talk about delegation, or how do you sort of have difficult conversations where, I know you want it, but we can't do it.
Yeah. Um, well, I think one of the first things that I often try and do is acknowledge the situation that somebody is coming to you with or bringing up, meaning, um, and acknowledge the impact that it is having on that person, either professionally or emotionally, personally. So, because I think there's often a temptation when you're managing a team, and especially a team that has, there's a lot of work and there's a lot to get done, and somebody comes to you and they're bringing this problem, and uh, it may be the 27th problem you've had to solve in the last hour, and um, uh, it's very easy to just either say, I can't deal with this now, or I don't know the answer, or you figure it out, or that's not I don't know what you're talking about, or that's not a really something we need to solve. But really, if the very first thing you do is acknowledge, like, thank you for bringing this to me, and I understand why that would be challenging, and why that is something that is, really occupying a lot of brain space for you right now. That actually can go a long way, because a lot of times people are, and this is you probably would acknowledge this from your personal life. A lot of times when you're talking to, a significant other or somebody that you're close with, and they're bringing something to you, something that they're going through, they're not necessarily looking for you to immediately solve it. They're just looking for you to acknowledge what they're feeling and how it's impacting them. So I would say the first thing is, like, acknowledge that thing, and say, yes, this is a challenge. um,
Is that empathy?
I think it is fueled
Okay.
by empathy, but I also think it's just a tactic. I think it's just a, remember to, somebody is bringing this to you, and to just, again, just acknowledge that it's a thing, and you understand what it is, how it is impacting the person who's telling you this thing. I think the other piece that I apologize in advance. It's going to sound very obvious, but it often is not obvious in the way that when somebody is really struggling with something, is to think about prioritization. Like, okay, this is an issue. Um, where does this fit in the list of things that we have to deal with? What is it? Is this the most important thing that we need or you need to solve in this hour or this day or this week? Is it, um, are there other things that are actually more urgent for XYZ reason? And if so, maybe we should surface those things and then circle back to this. When you're dealing with a challenge that's right in front of you, it often is hard to take that sort of like slight step back and think about how to prioritize coming up with a solution for that thing relative to all the other things on your plate. So that can be a key role that you can play as a leader, is to help someone figure out how to prioritize. Um, you mentioned delegating. I think delegating is always important to think about. Okay, you brought me this problem. I understand why this is an issue for you. And we've looked at what else is on your plate, and this is definitely a very key priority. So we figured out where it sits on that list. Um, can somebody else take this on? Do you need to be the one to solve this? And again, oftentimes people don't ask themselves that question. Well, somebody told me to do this, so I have to do it. Well, sure, but maybe actually somebody else can solve this, and you can work on something else. Um, and then I guess the last piece that I think about quite a bit, and that I definitely have said to my people on my teams, is that whatever role you play on the team, whether you are um, an operations person, an art director, a creative director, an editor, a strategist. We're all creative problem solvers. That really is sort of the heart of what we all do in the work that we do. Um, so to again, we were talking before about reframing. To think about reframing whatever that particular challenge is as not a problem, not a something that is going to ruin our day, not something that is causing us stress, but as a problem for us to come up with a creative solution for. And sometimes that reframing can be helpful.
Well, again, that's the challenge, is the opportunity, right? What might we create, figure out, and who might we become by just embracing the challenge? I've got this whole life philosophy that is based on that old Michelangelo quote when somebody asked him, how did you take this big hunk of marble and make this beautiful sculpture out of it? And his response was, the sculpture was already there. I just got rid of the rubble. And I think we need those challenges to expose the sculpture within, individually or as teams and organizations. When it comes to things like prioritization and delegation, which seems to take up a lot of the oxygen, because there's never enough time and resources. Are the answers like pretty obvious? Like an algorithm probably could have answered it. And we, and I'm asking that because I do wonder if one of the possibilities that will become true over the next couple of years is the algorithms will figure out the answers to all the easy questions, right? Like 1 + 1 = 2. It's the hard questions where the priority is obvious, but somebody still wants to work on something because it's something that's personal to them, related to them. And that's where the humans need to connect and have the conversation and collaborate and figure out, okay, like, what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The thing that just that last piece you were saying about, it's almost sort of the stubbornness of, no, I'm the very human response, like, I know you want me to do this, but I'm going to do this. um, that actually I think is probably a good thing, right? That's probably the thing that we've talked a lot in this conversation about things that are ultimately like fairly rational solutions, but so much, and again, because I've spent so much of my career in creative organizations, there is something to be said for like gut and instinct and the doggedness of saying, I know this doesn't feel like the right path to be on, but something is telling me I need to keep exploring it. I definitely wouldn't want anyone to lose that or to let go of that. I mean, um, in a way, it gets it does kind of get back to curiosity, right? Like um, all the scientific discoveries over the years where somebody and centuries where somebody was like, this thing doesn't, I can't quite figure it out, or it doesn't make any sense, and nobody thinks I should be thinking about it this way, but I'm just going to keep going because something is telling me there's like something interesting here. Yes, I definitely wouldn't want us to lose that.
I don't think we can. You said gut and intuition a couple of times through this conversation. I was talking to somebody at a big, fairly well-known global brand this morning, based out of across the pond in the UK, and you know, internally in their organization, like everyone from the CEO on down is trying to figure out like, oh, what's AI going to do? Because it's already smarter than us from an IQ level across every domain of knowledge. It thinks so quickly. So yes, it might be like just predicting, but it just does it so fast. Like the many, it sort of seems like sorcery, right? Like back in medieval times, we probably would have tried to drown it in the lake, and it would have kept popping back up, and we would have gone, "It's a witch! It's a witch!" Um, and I think one of the things we need to remind ourselves of is like AI, it is now the apex intelligence on the planet. It is no longer us, full stop. And it will continue to get smarter and smarter and smarter. But we are more than just the neurons in our heads. We are more than just IQ. We are these whole beings. And this sort of goes back to everything you've been talking about today. Is like we are full humans and our gut, our intuition, those things matter. As I get older, I've realized more and more, you know, um, I just did this, we just dropped this episode with Julia Arnson from Specsavers, and they've got this great tagline that's become iconic in the UK, like, should have gone to Specsavers. It's a eyeglass company. And I think it's related to, well, I made a mistake. I should have gone to Specsavers so I had better visibility. And I'm like, I think my tagline is should have trusted my gut, should have trusted my intuition. It is so important that we start to re-embrace that, whether as leaders or individual contributors, like that gut, that intuition is going to matter more than ever before, especially to figure out how do we go from here to there. Otherwise, everything turns into an algorithmic decision, as it increasingly has over the last 10, 15 years. But that actually doesn't align with what is the natural human experience. I think a lot of what we've been doing for the last few decades is, again, whether it's like our personal lives or work lives in a leadership role, has been very machine like, has been very unnatural. We tried to turn leadership into an algorithm when in fact it is a human endeavor.
So beautifully said. There's so many people in creative fields within the business world, advertising for sure, people in Hollywood, screenwriters, musicians who are very concerned about AI replacing some element of what they're doing. But the thing that I always keep coming back to is that when you talk about gut and intuition, we all have our own, all of the experiences that we've had as human beings have led to the moment that any particular moment in our lives, right? And so the intuition or the gut instinct that we have about how we should react to something is informed by all of the experiences we had, all the people we've interacted with, all the things we've read and seen, that's contributed to who we are at any particular moment. And that is, that particular humanity that leads to the authorship behind the decisions we make and the music we make and the things we write, that I think will continue even in a world where, to your point, AI is way smarter than any human being, will continue to be incredibly compelling. Like, AI may be able to make a movie, but I would still pay money to go see a movie made by, you know, the Coen brothers, because I know it came from them. Like,
Yeah.
everything that created who those people are, led them to make the decisions and create the piece of art that they did, and that is fascinating. It's not just about the ability of AI to come up with ideas. It's the authorship behind it is, and that is the gut instinct, that is the intuition that leads you to make to do something. Those are the things that make the decisions that you make, that I make, that anyone makes, endlessly fascinating. And I actually don't think that is replaceable.
So I want to comment on that, and then I have one final question for you as we're wrapping up here. It's I 100% agree with you. It's already the reason why, instead of sitting in the comfort of my home, we'll still go out to the comedy club because the jokes seem funnier when you're surrounded by other people. Or we'll go to the concert venue, even though like traffic's a pain and expensive, and a beer is $15 at the stadium, and the sound, quite frankly, isn't all that great. But there is something about being in that stadium with others and hearing the song that you all love. And I think AI will have its place for creating um, creative work, right? Like I often joke saying, like, yeah, we could have Fast and the Furious 85. You don't need screenwriters for that. like you could just like get AI to pound it out. But like the usual suspects, um, no, like that required like something new, unique. That required like that was a lived experience, and whatever that writer and that director, whatever they read, the experiences they had through life led to them creating this like really interesting, compelling, surprising movie that caught us all like well by surprise. It's yeah, AI will have its place like for like scaling the stories and the creative that's already been done. But we will keep creating the stories of tomorrow because they're going to be based on like our individual lived experiences. We are 8 billion people on this planet and 100 billion people who walked here before us. And we each have our own journey through life and our own lived experience. And I think we've been pushing ourselves, especially in the West, increasingly into these algorithm like life experiences of what we need to be enough, and we need to pull out of that even from a leadership point of view. So my final question for you is this: you talked about authenticity and trust and positivity, and so your approach to leadership, does it adapt based on the situation, or is it like authenticity? The way Jason practices leadership is the way Jason practice like you show up as Jason the leader in the same way in every situation, or do you tune your leadership algorithm for the situation?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The way I would frame it is, um, I will always show up as myself because I can't really be anybody else. But every person on the team needs something different in order to help them, with whatever challenge they have, that or whatever the opportunity is that they want to take advantage of. So uh, I may always show up in generally the same way, but I won't always use the same. I'm trying to think of the best analogy. If I'm the carpenter, I'm always going to show up as a carpenter. But one day I might need to pull the saw out of my toolkit. The next day I might need a hammer. The next day I might need a drill. Or I have all these tools in my toolkit. They're always there because I'm always the same person. But not every interaction requires the exact same set of tools that are in my toolkit.
Right.
So my skills and ability and approach, the things that I've learned, the way I think about solving problems, my intuition, my gut, my all those things are always the same. But I will apply the tools that I have in a different way depending on the person and the situation.
So I lied. I got one final question. So for somebody listening, for myself, for an
Yeah.
aspiring creative ops leader, what's your advice to them? So going back, 25, 30 years when you were at that agency and you were observing others around you and that was informing your view of what good leadership is.
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice to me and to other listeners?
If you were only going to take one piece of advice about how to be a great leader, um, here's the one thing I would say to you. You said you've been part of a lot of small companies, small organizations, but even in a small company, generally there is some kind of org chart, right? Like oftentimes, certainly these days, it's like PowerPoint or something else, and the org chart is got like a name at the top of the person who's leading that particular team, and then under that person, there's like the people who report to that person, and then under those people, there's people who report to those people, and so on and so on. If you reframe that org chart and flip it over and say, if I'm the leader of this team or this organization, I'm at the bottom of the page. And then above me are the people who report to me, and then above them are the people who report to them, and so on and so on. And you do that, and I mean that very literally. You literally look at that organizational chart and put yourself at the bottom of it. I can almost guarantee it will change the way you think about how to be a good leader, because rather than you sort of sitting on this perch and looking down at the people who are part of your team, you'll realize you are actually there to support everybody who is above you, and your most important role is to make sure that you hold them all up and don't let anyone fall. um, if you just do that one thing and you always remind yourself that's where you sit in the organization, I would say you probably will be well on your way to success.
Well, I'm going to add some AI steroids to that. And I think that's what you just said is a good setup for perhaps a follow on conversation later this year. I don't think the org chart exists in 5 years. I think an organization is a cloud of AI agents and a cloud of human talent. And leaders are going to have to figure out how to live in a world where we don't have these clean lines because they're going away. And I can already I'm already starting to see it happen. And leaders are going to almost have to be like, I think the new leader is going to be more like a philosopher king or queen. And I think there's going to be a lot of lessons to be learned from great military leaders on the battlefield where there isn't an org chart, but there is a mission and they have to figure out how to, you know, corral people, equipment, supply lines, and everything else in the service of that mission. But it's not going to be clean like an algorithmically driven org chart. It is going to be clouds of human talent and AI agents, and they are going to have to figure out how to harness that to create value. It's
That
not going
is,
to be easy, but it's going to be fun.
yeah, that's fascinating. I would love to. I would very much look forward to having another conversation about that.
All right. Well, Jason Holzman, thank you so much for joining us today. I have. We'll see if it catches on. The philosopher of creative operations and production, and the leadership philosopher of creative operations and production. But I got a ton out of this episode. I really appreciate it, and I almost feel selfish. I do. I do this. People always ask me why I do this podcast, and conversations like this is a reason why. I just want to follow my curiosity and just talk to people that I think have got an interesting background and perspective, and are willing to share it with me and those that are listening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I really always love talking to you. So thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Hey folks, Nish here for my reflections and questions segment where I go from talking and listening mode into thinking mode. Hopefully, some of this is helpful for you to also make that flip from listening mode to thinking mode. Maybe use it as a way to ask yourself questions that you weren't asking yourself, or to prompt a discussion with your team leadership. So I really enjoyed this conversation with Jason. As you may have noticed in the last few episodes, some of the conversations are getting a bit more philosophical. The one with Alexia, like what is creativity in the age of AI? The one with Emma that I recorded on her podcast, which was, sort of reimagining what an in-house agency might look like in the future, especially as these more and more of these AI capabilities come online. And certainly this conversation with Jason fit into that. As I said, I think of him as sort of the um, creative operations philosopher. He's a great guy. If you get a chance to meet him at an event, or if you're in New York City, maybe you could take him out for a coffee or something like that. He's an amazing individual. And the one thing that really sort of struck me through this that I've been thinking about is leadership is going to matter more than ever before. And really thinking about what leadership is and what your leadership style is, what my leadership style is important. Because I think leadership over the last 20, 30, 40 years has been increasingly been defined by what I call spreadsheet leadership. How much, how quickly, how cost efficiently. It's it's all these quantifiable things. And those are important because ultimately we all work in organizations and a system that is about value creation. Full stop. So I'm not arguing with that. But in a world where leadership again has been defined by optimizing for the quantifiable outcomes, these AI tools, and I know I talk a lot about AI, but I think this is important, so listen up. These AI tools, as I've said, are better at the work that creative operations, creative production, in house agency leaders have been tasked with doing, historically defined by the work of orchestration and optimization to maximize for yield, for that yield of how many assets, how quickly, how cost efficiently, who, what, when. These are all um, decisions that ultimately are a function of orchestration and optimization. And guess what, folks? The machines, the AIs, are better at orchestration and optimization just because they're better at dealing with vast quantities of data, being able to connect dots, being able to prioritize based on quantifiable variables and desired outcomes. And the messy part always has been, and certainly it still is and will continue to be, it's us, it's the human parts. We are the always the X factor. So as AIs are going to help sort of take on that work that has always been the domain of the creative ops and creative production and in-house agency leader of orchestration and optimization, I think the opportunity, the challenge is to really step into what Jason was talking about, that human part, leading from a human-centered approach. And we've heard this from some other guests on the podcast, like, Kate Sullivan and Paul Nicholson and a whole raft of others. And I think it's especially important now because the change that's going to be coming at us is going to be pretty violent. It's going to be head spinning. If we haven't seen anything yet, like the last 2 years has probably felt like a lot of change. but we haven't seen anything yet. I constantly remind myself of what Ray Kurzweil said a few years ago. Like, in this century, we're going to experience 20,000 years of technological change. And maybe he was being a bit hyperbolic and he doesn't have a crystal ball. He's a pretty smart dude, but he doesn't have a crystal ball. But even cut that in half, 10,000 years of technological change this century. You know what? Let's cut that in half again. 5,000 years of technological change in this century. Like, that's going to be a lot of change, even if you cut in half again. That is going to be a head spinning amount of change. And again, I'll go back to the machines are going to be better at orchestration and optimization. So I think as a creative ops leader and in-house agency leader, you need to start thinking about what is your job of leadership. And I think Jason provides a good starting point for a model like that human-centered approach to leadership. And I think that's going to be especially important because we are going to have to be navigating teams through a seismic amount of change. So, some questions I've been thinking about that I'll offer to you. One, if leadership is about creating the right conditions for success, how do you think about what are the right structures and really the right mindsets that you're going to need to be able to like foster to create stronger, more adaptable things? Like, and I think that also then sort of dovetails into how are we going to think differently about what are we measuring? So if the machines are going to take care of orchestration and optimization and how much, how quickly, and how cost efficiently, what are you going to measure to like understand, are the individuals and is your team collectively, are they adaptable, are they resilient, how well are they suited to dealing with change? And I don't think that's easy, but it's something you're going to have to do. And like, we should be talking about this. Can that be done in a quantifiable way? Is it more qualitative? What are the questions we should be asking ourselves around that? Second question is, in a world where uncertainty is constant, as we talked about, and I think that's always been true, it's just been sort of on a slower drip. And now it's basically going to be like the fire hose of change is literally getting turned on. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. If you disagree and come at me. But in a world where uncertainty is constant, where change is constant, how do you define stability as a leader? Is it about predictability or is it about trust and adaptability? And I think predictability is something that as humans we always strive for, as operations and in-house agency leaders, we strive for. We want to be able to say, yeah, we're going to do this much within this period of time. And it's about like resource management, capacity planning, and things like that. But again, the machines are going to be doing a lot of that. And that capacity is also going to be scaled through AI, especially for what I call transactional creative work, that bottom of funnel work. But if it's really about like trust and adaptability, how are you going to define that? And is stability about predictability, or is it just about the ability just to deal with change as it comes? It's like, okay, this happened, let's deal with it. And if you listen to the whole episode, I talked a little bit about my own personal experience with a physical disability. And one thing I'll share with you, that the people in my life that know me best, my brother, my friends, my girlfriend, they frequently comment on, they're like, no matter what happens in your life, you just deal with it. And if you, I don't know if I still have it on my LinkedIn profile, but on my LinkedIn profile, I used to say, and I think I still do, my disability is my superpower. Because one of the things that's given me the ability to just the way to be is no matter what happens, I just deal with it. Very little phases me. I'll get scared at a haunted house or on a roller coaster, which I love. But in terms of like the big unexpected surprises life puts in front of us, in front of me, it's just another day at the office. So I think you need to be asking yourself, how do you define stability as a leader? Is it about predictability, about predictable outcomes? Or is it about trust and adaptability and just being able to deal with change as it comes? And how are you going to do that for yourself? How are you going to nurture that in your team? Uh, the next question I'll offer for you is, again, around adaptability. I think, if adaptability is the most important leadership skill today, and I do think it is, maybe if not the most, one of the three most important skills. How do you strengthen this in yourself? How do you strengthen this in your teams? Like, what can you be doing outside of the 9 to 5 to strengthen, you know, your adaptability? How do you start to think differently about life? Some of the things I've done, again, I'll go back to my disability, but, through that process, it was investing into things like journaling. I love reading about history and the challenges that others have faced and how they overcame them. And just the realization that we are here for an astronomical blink of an eye. And we may as well just like have fun and treat this all as a game. And that's allowed me to become more adaptable and just deal with things as they come. And next question I'll offer you is, I think this is probably a good question for you and your creative leader to talk about, and then maybe have a conversation with executive leadership. And it's this: if leadership, executive leadership, is about creating the right conditions for great work, what do you wish they knew about the creative process? I think very often creative ops leaders don't have this conversation with their creative leaders so that they themselves better understand the creative process and have empathy. And that word empathy came up a lot in the conversation with Jason. And then having the conversation with executive leaders, the chief marketing officer, even the CEO, just so they understand. Because I think very often people go, oh, the creative process. You got Photoshop, Final Cut Pro, and now you have these AI tools where you could just magically press the easy button and stuff comes out. Because I guarantee you, every CMO and CEO has probably played with Midjourney at least for a minute, if not longer. And they've typed in words or spoken words, and all of a sudden, what comes out is this image that was in their head 3 seconds ago, and now it's on the screen, or a video that was in their head 3 seconds ago, and now it's on the screen using a tool like Sora. So I think it's important in this time to help people understand the creative process so that they have empathy for the real creative process. I'm not talking about creative automation. I'm talking about the creative process, that blank canvas creative work, and understanding that what these great creatives bring to the table, their whole selves, their holistic creative selves. So that's the last question I'll leave you with. As usual, there's like a list of about like 20, 30 of these. If you ever want to get more of them, just hit me up on LinkedIn or send me an email or text me if you have my cell number. And hopefully this is helpful. I'll catch you on the next one.